Elias had always lived a quiet life in the small town of Brindlewood. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and days passed in a comfortable, predictable rhythm. Children ran barefoot along the cobblestone streets, merchants shouted their wares from colorful stalls, and the scent of fresh bread and herbs mingled with the crisp air from the river that cut through the village. Elias, however, had always felt slightly out of step with this world. While others found contentment in simple routines, he yearned for something more, something beyond the ordinary confines of everyday life. One summer afternoon, with the sun high and warm overhead, Elias wandered further into the forest than he usually dared. The trees here grew taller and older, their thick roots twisting over the forest floor, and sunlight filtered through the leaves in golden streaks. Birds sang in harmony above him, and the faint buzz of insects filled the air. Elias had walked this path countless times before, but that day, something drew him deeper into the woods. As he stepped over a fallen log, his foot caught on something hard. Looking down, he saw an object half buried in dirt and dry leaves. It was a lamp, small, ornate, and glimmering faintly, as though it had caught the attention of the sunlight in a secret way. It was the kind of object he had read about in stories, the kind whispered about in fairy tales and bedtime tales. Its surface was etched with delicate, swirling patterns, worn smooth in some areas and glinting gold in others. Elias hesitated for a moment, his curiosity warring with a sense of caution. "What on earth?" he muttered. His fingers brushed the lamp, and he instinctively began to rub it to remove the dirt. The moment his hands moved over the metal, a sudden puff of smoke burst from the spout. Elias stumbled backward, tripping over a root and falling hard onto the forest floor. The smoke swirled and thickened, taking shape in the most incredible form he had ever seen. Before him stood a figure of breathtaking beauty. She towered, though in a way that seemed natural and graceful, not imposing. Her hair floated as if it moved underwater, glimmering with colors that shifted like liquid sunlight. Her eyes glowed gold, and when she spoke, the words carried a resonance that made the air itself vibrate.
"I am Solara, the genie of this lamp," she said, her voice both commanding and melodic.
"You may make 3 wishes. Ask, and they shall be granted." Elias gaped, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossibility before him. Genies were myths, stories told to children. Yet here she was, real, alive, and radiant. His heart raced, a mix of fear and excitement surging through him. Most people, he knew, would wish for treasures beyond imagination, for long life, for invincible power. But as he looked into Solara's glowing eyes, a thought came to him, one that surprised even himself. "I wish," he began slowly, searching for the words. "I wish for humanity to always understand itself." For a moment, Solara froze, her golden eyes widened in sheer astonishment. "You? What?" she said, her voice tinged with disbelief.
"You are not asking for wealth or power or eternal life. You wish
For humans to understand themselves? Elias nodded. "Yes. I want people to see each other clearly, to understand their actions and their consequences, to truly connect, to truly learn from each other. Isn't that more valuable than anything else?" Solara blinked, an expression of amusement and wonder crossing her ethereal features. She had granted countless wishes over centuries, grandiose, selfish, foolish, but never one like this. It was unusual for a human to think beyond themselves, to ask for something intangible yet vital. "You are remarkable," Solara said finally, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Most mortals are shallow or greedy. They ask for riches, for power, for immortality. Very rarely does one ask for wisdom, for all humankind." Elias felt a warm thrill. He had expected surprise, maybe disbelief, but not praise from a being of such immense power. I just think that if people understood themselves, if they understood each other, maybe the world would be better. Wars, greed, hatred. They all come from ignorance, from misunderstanding. I want that to change. Solara floated closer, examining him carefully. Do you know what you ask, human? Understanding is not simple. People are messy, unpredictable, stubborn. Knowledge comes with burden. Do you truly wish this upon humanity? Yes, Elias replied without hesitation. I think they can handle it. Maybe not all at once, maybe not immediately, but it is possible. And if someone has to start, I hope it can start with a spark. If I can make people see, even for a moment, the truth about themselves and each other, it will be worth it. The genie's gaze softened. You are brave. Or foolish. Perhaps both. Her smile, radiant and mysterious, revealed a glimmer of admiration. She raised her hands and the air around them shimmered, tiny motes of light dancing like stars. Very well, Elias. Your first wish shall be granted. Humanity shall glimpse its own truth. But know this, the path of understanding is complicated. There will be resistance, confusion, even conflict. Not all are ready for clarity. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine, both fear and excitement mingling. He had not imagined that a simple wish could carry such weight. But the magnitude of what Solara had said only made him more determined. I understand, he said. I will do what I can to help them see, to help them use the knowledge well. Solara nodded, her eyes glowing brighter. Then it begins. With a graceful wave of her hand, a ripple of light spread across the world, invisible yet tangible. Elias felt it like a pulse in his chest, a vibration in the very air. Something had changed. The world, though outwardly the same, seemed sharper, more alive. The wind whispered secrets, the trees shimmered with hidden knowledge, and the people he glimpsed in the distance seemed subtly different, as if they were on the verge of awakening. Over the following days, Elias noticed small, profound changes. Conversations in the village grew deeper. Neighbors who had previously bickered over trivial matters now paused to listen to each other, their eyes thoughtful, their words carefully chosen. Children played games that required cooperation and empathy. Even merchants, normally focused only on profit, began sharing goods and helping those in need. Elias marveled at the transformation, but he also saw the challenges. Not everyone embraced this new clarity. Some were frustrated by it, confused, even angry. Old grudges surfaced, unresolved tensions came to light, and misunderstandings intensified before resolution. He realized that Solara had been right. Truth and understanding could be both beautiful and painful. One evening, as Elias walked along the river, he found Solara waiting for him. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and violet, and her golden eyes reflected the colors like twin suns. Do you see it? She asked softly. Yes, Elias said, his voice filled with awe. It's more than I imagined. People are thinking, questioning, learning, but it's not perfect. Some resist, some lash out. That is inevitable, Solara replied. Understanding is a journey, not a gift. You cannot force it upon everyone, nor should you try. All you can do is guide, inspire, and sometimes protect. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had never sought power, yet with this wish, he had become a catalyst for change. It was thrilling, terrifying, and humbling, all at once. Solara floated closer, her expression gentle.
Your heart is extraordinary, Elias.
I have seen countless humans and most are focused only on themselves. Yet you care for all. That is rare, and it is why I am here, bound to your wishes. The world may never know what you have done, but its course has shifted because of you. Elias looked at her, a sense of quiet determination growing within him. Then I will do my best, I want people to not only understand themselves, but to use that understanding for good. If this is just the first step, I want the next steps to matter even more." Solara's smile widened. "Very well. One wish down, two to go. But remember, human, the choices you make next may shape not just yourself, but the world in ways you cannot yet imagine. Are you ready?" Elias took a deep breath, the weight of possibility settling around him like a cloak. "I am ready," he said, and as night fell over Brindlewood, the lamp glimmered faintly in the corner of his small home. Elias could feel the pulse of the wish still flowing through the world, subtle but unstoppable. Somewhere, deep within him, he knew that this was only the beginning, that the adventure of understanding, of guiding humanity to its potential, had truly begun. The forest outside whispered in the night, carrying secrets, hopes, and fears. And within the lamp, Solara watched, her thoughts turning toward the future, curious to see how a human's extraordinary wish would unfold. Elias, ordinary by every measure, had just changed the world, and neither he nor anyone else would ever be the same again. Days passed since Elias made his first wish, and the world began to shift in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. The changes were not immediate or dramatic, but to Elias they were impossible to ignore, even as he went about his simple daily routines, walking through the village, helping neighbors with small tasks, or observing the river that cut through Brindlewood. He noticed that people were acting differently. Conversations seemed deeper, eyes carried new awareness. Even arguments that once would have ended in petty fights now turned into discussions. It was as though the world had been muted in a fog of misunderstanding for centuries, and Elias had cracked the window open. Light poured in. Some welcomed it immediately. Children in the village, usually distracted by simple games and mischief, began asking questions about the stars, the river, and even why humans sometimes hurt each other. Parents listened more carefully. Teachers explained more thoughtfully. Even strangers paused to consider their words before speaking. Yet, as Solara had warned, the awakening was not without tension. Not everyone was ready for clarity. Some people grew frustrated at the sudden awareness of their own flaws, their selfishness, or the mistakes they had made. Long-standing grudges erupted, old rivalries flared, and hidden resentments surfaced. What had been invisible before now became painfully clear. People did not always respond gracefully to this truth. Elias watched all of this with a mix of awe and concern. He walked through the market one morning and overheard a heated discussion between two merchants who had never gotten along. Previously, they would have exchanged bitter words and avoided each other for weeks. But now, they argued not just about money, but about fairness, honesty, and trust. Their voices were louder, more intense, yet beneath the anger, Elias could see something new. Understanding. They were confronting themselves and each other. And though it was messy, it was real. He paused to observe a young girl sitting alone on a bench, staring at the river, with wide, thoughtful eyes. Her name was Mira. She was clever, always asking questions that adults found inconvenient or strange. But now she was different. Her questions were sharper, her curiosity boundless. She noticed things others overlooked. Elias knelt beside her. "Thinking about something important?" he asked gently. Mira looked up, her eyes bright with both excitement and confusion. "Why do people fight, even when they don't want to?" she asked. "Why do they hurt each other, even when they know it's wrong?" Elias smiled faintly, touched by her honesty. Sometimes people don't see clearly. They act without thinking, or they misunderstand each other. But if they can learn to understand themselves, maybe they won't hurt each other so much. Mira nodded, her small face serious beyond her years. "Can people really learn that fast?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, "but we can try. And maybe even small changes can grow into something big." Solara, ever present though invisible to most, watched with silent approval. She had followed Elias into the village, curious about how the human world would respond to his extraordinary wish. Normally, humans were selfish and short-sighted, but Elias's wish had shifted something fundamental. He had sparked curiosity, honesty, and empathy, not just in himself, but in others. It was rare, unprecedented, and exhilarating for her. As the days turned into weeks, Elias noticed more profound changes. People were attempting to help one another in ways they never had before. Strangers shared food with those in need. Villagers who had ignored the elderly now paused to speak with them, asking questions and listening with attention. Teachers encouraged students to express their feelings openly. Even local officials, normally rigid and self-serving, began considering the long-term consequences of their decisions. Yet the awakening also revealed humanity's darker corners. With understanding came awareness of past mistakes and injustices. Arguments that had lain dormant for years resurfaced. Families confronted hidden betrayals. Communities grappled with inequalities that had been ignored for generations. Elias realized that clarity was not a simple gift. It was a challenge, a burden, and a responsibility, all at once. One afternoon, as Elias wandered through the forest once more, he encountered Solara, her golden eyes glowing softly in the dappled sunlight. "You are watching the world change," she said, her voice calm yet curious. "How does it feel?" Elias sighed, resting against a tree. "It's beautiful, in a way I never imagined. People are learning, seeing, feeling, violent. But it's messy. Some are angry. Some are scared. Some are confused. I thought it would be simpler." Solara tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. Understanding is rarely simple. Clarity can inspire great kindness, but it can also create turmoil. People must confront themselves, and that is never easy. You have given them a mirror. Some are ready to look, others are not. Elias nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I suppose it's like planting seeds. Some grow quickly, others slowly. Some may even wither. But as long as we keep planting, there's hope." Solara smiled faintly. "And you have the courage to plant, human. That is why your first wish is extraordinary. But it is only the beginning. The path ahead will test you and humanity in ways you cannot yet imagine." Indeed, the consequences of Elias's wish soon reached beyond the small village. News of extraordinary awareness began spreading. Nearby towns reported sudden shifts in behavior. People resolving disputes peacefully, questioning old traditions, seeking knowledge and understanding. Scholars were amazed as unusual discoveries occurred in science, art, and philosophy. People seemed more cooperative, more reflective, more willing to challenge their own biases. But not everyone embraced the change. Some feared it, believing that newfound understanding threatened their authority or comfort. Religious leaders, political figures, and influential merchants felt unsettled as the balance of power subtly shifted. Some attempted to manipulate the awakening for personal gain, while others resisted it outright, spreading rumors, sowing confusion, and challenging the new perspectives. Elias realized that granting understanding was not a one-time act. It was a force that would ripple unpredictably. He began traveling beyond Brindlewood, meeting with scholars, leaders, and everyday people. He listened more than he spoke, offering guidance when asked, and silently marveling at the courage of ordinary humans striving to be better. One evening, he stood atop a hill overlooking a distant town. The lights of homes glimmered like stars scattered across the landscape. He thought of Mira, the villagers, the scholars, and even the people resisting the change. Each was confronting the truth in their own way. Some stumbled, some faltered, but all had been awakened. Solara appeared beside him, her presence warm and reassuring. "Do you see now, human?" she asked. Understanding is not a gift that makes life easier. It is a challenge, a responsibility, and a test. Yet it can inspire greatness.
Yes, I see that, and I see that people can rise to it.
Some may fail, but others will surprise me. I think that is what makes humans extraordinary. Solara's eyes sparkled with approval. Indeed, you have reminded me why humanity is worth guiding, worth challenging, and worth watching. Most mortals would have wasted this wish. You have not. As the night deepened, Elias felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the knowledge that the work was far from over. Humanity had been given a glimpse of itself, but the journey toward wisdom, empathy, and understanding was ongoing. It would not be simple. It would not be immediate. But with courage, reflection, and care, it could change the world forever. In the days that followed, Elias continued his travels, observing the subtle and dramatic transformations alike. In some towns, people had formed councils to resolve disputes fairly. In others, long-standing feuds had dissolved as families confronted their misunderstandings. Everywhere there was movement, a forward push of thought and awareness. Yet he also saw the fragility of this awakening. Confusion, fear, and resistance still lingered. Some people misused clarity to manipulate others, while some simply could not bear the responsibility of self-knowledge. Elias realized that understanding was not a permanent state. It required guidance, courage, and continual effort. One morning, as he returned to Brindlewood, Elias saw Mira running toward him. She had grown more confident, her mind sharp and curious. "Elias," she called, breathless with excitement, "people are really changing. Look at what's happening everywhere. Even the adults are trying to think before they act." He smiled, ruffling her hair gently. "Yes, Mira, the world is waking up. But remember, it's not easy. Understanding is powerful, but it comes with challenges." "I know," she said, her eyes shining. "But I think we can help each other. We can guide people, remind them to be better." Elias felt a surge of hope. "Yes, Mira. That is why we continue, one step at a time." Solara, watching from nearby, allowed herself a small smile. The human before her, small and ordinary in appearance, had sparked a change that even she had not foreseen. He had chosen wisely, thought deeply, and acted with a selflessness rare among mortals. The first wish was a success, but the future would test him further, with new challenges, temptations, and surprises. And as the sun rose over Brindlewood, painting the river and fields in gold, Elias stood ready. Humanity had glimpsed its own potential. Now the journey toward true understanding was only beginning. And somewhere deep inside him, he knew the second wish, and the choices that came with it, would push the boundaries even further, testing not only the world, but the very nature of human courage and ingenuity. The world was shifting in ways Elias could no longer simply observe from a distance. His first wish, meant to awaken humanity to understanding, had grown like a river, spreading into every corner of society. People were thinking more deeply, speaking more honestly, and reflecting on their actions. Yet, as the days passed, Elias realized that clarity was not always welcomed. The truth, even when noble, could unsettle people, and the shadows of fear and doubt had begun to stir. In a city several miles from Brindlewood, Elias walked through streets buzzing with the energy of awakening. Citizens who once ignored one another now paused to make eye contact, exchange ideas, or offer small gestures of kindness. Shopkeepers discussed fairness and honesty. Students debated morality and ethics. On the surface, it was beautiful, a flowering of human potential. But beneath that beauty, tension simmered. Not everyone was ready for such illumination. Some people resisted the new awareness. Politicians, sensing a shift in influence, whispered behind closed doors, plotting to regain control. Wealthy merchants feared that fairness and transparency would ruin their businesses. religious leaders struggled with the sudden influx of questions, challenging traditions, and long-held doctrines. In one town square, a small crowd gathered, protesting what they called the unnatural push for human perfection. Signs demanded that people return to old ways, insisting that understanding brought chaos, not harmony. Elias, walking quietly among them, felt the complexity of his first wish. Even noble intentions, he realized, carried consequences that could be messy and unpredictable. Yet he refused to despair. If people could awaken to truth, they could also find ways to heal, to build, and to create a stronger society. His role, he knew, was not to command or control, but to guide, to inspire, and to help humanity navigate the turbulence of self-awareness. Solara appeared beside him, her golden glow a calm contrast to the human crowd. "Do you see, Elias?" she asked. "The path of understanding is not smooth. It reveals greatness, yes, but also fear, resistance, and anger. Humanity is struggling with the burden of truth." Elias nodded, scanning the crowd. A young man argued with his father, revealing years of resentment that had been buried in silence. A mother wept as her teenage daughter questioned everything she had ever taught her. Even in moments of conflict, however, Elias saw hope. People were confronting themselves. They were speaking openly, trying, even clumsily, to reconcile their beliefs with the knowledge they now possessed.
It's intense, Elias said.
They are learning, but it's not easy. They're hurting as much as they're growing.
Is that supposed to happen? Solara's eyes glimmered with understanding. Yes.
Awakening is not gentle. It is a storm.
Some will stumble, some will lash out, and some will rise stronger. What you must remember is that humanity's potential lies not in perfection, but in its courage to face itself. Elias took a deep breath and stepped into the crowd. A man approached him, his face red with frustration. "Who are you?" the man demanded. "Why is everyone suddenly acting as if they must think for themselves? This is chaos." "I'm just someone who cares about people," Elias replied calmly. Understanding is not chaos. It is awareness. It is seeing yourself and others clearly. That can be frightening, but it can also be liberating. The man stared at him, torn between anger and curiosity. Finally, he shook his head and walked away, muttering to himself. Elias exhaled. He knew that guiding humans required patience, not force. Awakening could not be rushed. It had to be nurtured, encouraged, and sometimes defended. That night, Elias sat by the river, reflecting on the day. The water mirrored the moonlight, sparkling in gentle ripples. Solara appeared beside him, her presence as comforting as the night breeze. "You are doing well, human," she said. "You are helping them learn, even when it is difficult. But be aware, knowledge is powerful, and power can be dangerous in human hands." Elias frowned slightly. "I know. I've already seen it. Some people resist understanding, while others, they might use it for control or manipulation." "How do we prevent that?" Solara's gaze turned distant, thoughtful. "We cannot prevent everything. Humans must learn to balance knowledge with wisdom, awareness with humility. That is why your role is important. You are a guide, not a ruler. You inspire, but you do not command. You show the path, but they must choose it themselves." The next morning, Elias traveled to a neighboring town, hoping to observe how understanding affected communities with long-standing conflicts. He found a town divided by centuries-old disputes, families feuding over land, merchants competing ruthlessly, and neighbors distrustful of one another. The awakening had arrived there too, and the effects were startling. At first, the town erupted in confusion. Arguments flared as people confronted hidden betrayals, unspoken resentments, and long-ignored injustices. Some families refused to speak to each other. Some merchants threatened boycotts, and the local council struggled to maintain order. But Elias noticed something remarkable, even in anger. there was honesty. People admitted their mistakes, apologized, and began tentative steps toward reconciliation. He watched as two old rivals, men who had despised each other for decades, met in the town square. Their hands shook, their faces awkward with vulnerability, but they spoke openly about their grievances for the first time. Elias felt a thrill of hope. This was progress. Not easy, not perfect, but real. Solara appeared again, silently observing. "See how they stumble, yet move forward," she said.
Awakening is messy, but it is alive. The human spirit is resilient.
Even when confronted with truth they do not want, many rise above it. I can see that. But what about those who refuse to rise? Those who reject change entirely?
Some will resist forever,
Solara admitted.
some will even try to harm others to maintain the old ways.
But the more who awaken, the stronger the movement becomes. Understanding cannot be stopped once it begins. It will ripple outward, finding new hearts, new minds, and new hope. Over the following weeks, Elias traveled further, observing the spread of human awareness across towns, cities, and villages. Everywhere, people confronted their own flaws and misunderstandings. Some stumbled, some faltered, some fought, but many grew stronger, more compassionate, and more capable of empathy.
Elias documented their stories, spoke with those willing to share their experiences, and quietly guided conversations when misunderstandings threatened to spiral. Yet even as he worked, he realized the first wish had unforeseen consequences.
Awareness brought not only empathy, but also vulnerability. People now recognize their own limitations, their fears, and the fragility of their societies. Anxiety grew in some, despair in others. A scholar in a distant city wrote to Elias, explaining that with sudden self-awareness, some individuals had become paralyzed by the weight of truth, unable to act decisively. Elias understood immediately. Knowledge without guidance could be overwhelming. Solara had warned him, but seeing it unfold firsthand was sobering. He realized that awakening humanity was not a single act, but a continuous effort. People needed not only insight, but also support, encouragement, and practical ways to apply their understanding. One evening, Elias returned to Brindlewood, exhausted but determined. Mira ran to meet him, her small frame full of energy despite the long day.
"Elias," she exclaimed, "look at the school! The children are helping each other solve problems. Even older kids are listening to the younger ones."
And the council is actually talking to the villagers instead of ordering them around. Elias smiled, feeling a sense of pride and hope. That is wonderful, Mira. But remember, progress is not always smooth.
Some will struggle. Some will resist.
And some may try to turn understanding into control. We must remain vigilant. Mira frowned thoughtfully. Do you think people will ever be ready? Elias looked out at the horizon, where the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting golden light across the fields and forests.
I don't know,
He admitted.
but I believe they can be.
Humanity is capable of greatness. That is why I made this wish. That is why I keep helping. Even if only a few rise at a time, the ripple will continue. Solara appeared silently beside them, her presence serene and luminous. You have done well, Elias, she said softly. You have guided, inspired, and observed, but know this, the awakening is only the beginning. The forces of resistance, fear, and misuse will grow stronger. How you respond to them will determine not only the future of humanity, but the outcome of your second and third wishes as well. Elias nodded, determination hardening in his chest. He understood the stakes now. His first wish had sparked something extraordinary, but it was fragile, and humanity was not yet ready to fully embrace it. The second wish, when it came, would need careful thought. And the third, well, he dared not even imagine the possibilities. That night, as he lay in bed, Elias reflected on everything he had seen. Humanity was changing. Slowly, imperfectly, beautifully. People were learning to face themselves, to confront both their virtues and their flaws. Some stumbled, some faltered, but many rose above the challenges, growing stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. He thought of Mira, of the villagers, of the distant cities, and even of those who resisted. All were part of the same tapestry, the same awakening. And somewhere deep inside him, Elias felt a quiet confidence. Humanity could rise. Humanity could be better. And he, an ordinary man who had stumbled upon an extraordinary lamp, had set the first stone of that path. Solara, watching from the window of the night sky, allowed herself a rare smile. The human before her had done what most mortals could not. He had chosen selflessness, courage, and vision over greed, fear, or desire. The first wish had been granted, and the world was already transforming. But the greatest challenges still lay ahead, and the next wishes would test not only Elias, but humanity itself, in ways even she could not predict. And so the night deepened over Brindlewood and the world beyond. The stars shone brightly, as if bearing witness to the awakening of humanity. The river whispered its secrets, carrying the promise of growth, understanding, and change. And Elias, ordinary yet extraordinary in his vision, prepared for the trials yet to come, ready to guide, inspire, and face the consequences of the remarkable path he had set in motion.